Space is silent, cold, endless, and yet, for thousands of years, humans have looked up at the stars and asked the same question: how far could we really go? Not how far our machines can travel, not how far our signals can reach, but how far a human body made of fragile cells, water, and breath could survive before space itself begins to break it apart. Tonight, we will follow that journey, from low Earth orbit to deep space beyond the Moon, past Mars, and toward the absolute edge of human survival. Along the way, we will uncover what radiation does to your DNA, what isolation does to your mind, and what the vacuum of space slowly takes from your body, second by second. This is not science fiction. This is the real limit of being human. Before we begin, take a moment to subscribe to Theories Before Sleep, where science, space, and the universe slow down, so your mind can drift and your curiosity can stay awake. Now, get comfortable, breathe slowly, and let's begin the journey to the farthest place a human could ever go. Low Earth orbit is the closest place to Earth where humans can remain in space for long periods of time. It sits only a few hundred kilometers above the planet's surface. From this height, Earth still fills half the sky. Blue oceans curve gently below. Clouds move slowly across continents. Day and night arrive every 90 minutes. And yet, despite how close it looks, this environment is already far beyond what the human body was designed to endure. Here, gravity is no longer pulling the body downward in the way it evolved to expect. Instead of standing, walking, or resting against solid ground, every part of the body floats. At first, this feels effortless. Weight disappears. Movement becomes smooth and slow. Objects drift instead of falling, but very quickly, the absence of gravity begins to change the body from the inside. Without gravity compressing the skeleton, bones no longer receive the constant mechanical stress that keeps them dense and strong. Calcium begins to leave the bone structure and move into the bloodstream. Over weeks and months, bones slowly weaken. The hips, spine, and legs are affected the most. These are the parts of the body that normally carry weight on Earth. In orbit, they no longer have a purpose. The body adapts by reducing their strength. Muscles follow the same pattern. On Earth, even standing still requires constant muscle activation. In orbit, floating replaces standing. Large muscle groups in the legs and back begin to shrink. Strength fades. Endurance drops. Astronauts must exercise for hours each day simply to slow this process down. Even with intense training, muscle loss cannot be completely stopped. At the same time, fluids inside the body begin to shift upward. On Earth, gravity pulls blood and other fluids toward the lower half of the body. In orbit, that pull disappears. Fluid redistributes toward the chest and head. Faces appear slightly swollen, nasal passages feel congested. Pressure builds inside the skull. Over long periods, this can affect vision. Some astronauts experience changes in eyesight that persist even after returning home. The heart also begins to adapt to this new environment. On Earth, the heart works constantly against gravity to pump blood upward to the brain. In orbit, this resistance is reduced. The heart no longer needs to work as hard. Over time, the heart muscle can become slightly smaller. While this may sound efficient, it creates a problem when astronauts return to Earth. Gravity suddenly returns, and the heart must once again push blood upward with full force. The body needs time to readjust. Sleep becomes another challenge. In orbit, the natural rhythm of day and night is disrupted. The spacecraft circles Earth rapidly, causing sunlight and darkness to alternate dozens of times each day. Without careful scheduling and artificial lighting, the body's internal clock can become confused. Melatonin production changes. Rest becomes shallow and fragmented. Over long missions, poor sleep can affect focus, memory, and emotional stability. Then there is radiation. Even in low Earth orbit, the planet's magnetic field only provides partial protection. High-energy particles from the Sun and distant cosmic sources constantly pass through space. Some are deflected by Earth's magnetosphere, others penetrate spacecraft walls and pass through human tissue. Each particle carries enough energy to damage cells at a microscopic level. Most of the time the damage is repaired naturally by the body, but over long durations, repeated exposure increases long-term risks. DNA mutations can accumulate, cellular repair systems are pushed harder than they evolved to handle. The danger is not immediate, but it is persistent. It follows every astronaut quietly, invisible and unstoppable. The immune system also reacts to spaceflight. Studies have shown that immune responses can weaken in orbit. White blood cells become less effective. Latent viruses inside the body, normally kept dormant, can reactivate. Even minor infections become more complicated where medical facilities are limited, and gravity-free conditions affect how fluids behave inside the body. Psychologically, orbit is both beautiful and isolating. The view of Earth inspires awe. Many astronauts describe a deep emotional shift when seeing the planet as a fragile sphere suspended in darkness. But isolation also grows quietly. The same walls surround you every day. The same small crew shares limited space. There is no fresh air, no natural wind, no open horizon to walk toward. Communication delays are short in low Earth orbit, but emotional distance can still build. Family and friends exist on a world that feels close enough to touch, yet completely unreachable. Over months, the mind must adapt to confinement, repetition, and constant awareness that survival depends on machines functioning correctly. The human body is remarkably adaptable. That is why long missions on space stations are possible at all. Exercise routines, strict schedules, controlled diets, and continuous monitoring allow astronauts to remain in orbit for 6 months or more. Some have stayed for nearly a year. These missions demonstrate the outer edge of what the human body can tolerate while still maintaining health. But even here, limits appear. After extended time in orbit, returning to Earth becomes physically demanding. Balance systems inside the inner ear need time to recalibrate. Standing feels strange. Walking requires effort. Muscles tremble slightly as they relearn how to support weight. The cardiovascular system adjusts gradually. Bones begin rebuilding density, but full recovery can take months or longer. These changes reveal something important. Low Earth orbit is not a neutral environment. It is not simply empty space with Earth nearby. It is already hostile enough to push the human body away from its natural state. And yet, this is still the safest region of space humans have ever occupied for long periods. The protective bubble of Earth's magnetic field still surrounds the spacecraft. Emergency return to the planet is possible within hours. Supplies can be delivered. Rescue missions remain theoretically achievable. This is the last place where space still allows mistakes. Beyond this region, safety begins to disappear. Radiation grows stronger, communication delays increase. Rescue becomes impossible. Every kilometer away from Earth removes another layer of protection. Low Earth orbit is where the human body first begins to feel the true cost of leaving its home planet. Not through dramatic events, but through slow, silent changes that accumulate day by day. Cells adapt, muscles shrink, bones lighten, the heart relaxes. The brain learns new rhythms, the immune system shifts its balance. The body becomes something slightly different from what it was on Earth. This is the first step on a much longer journey. Because if the human body already struggles this close to home, what happens when Earth's protection finally disappears completely? And how far can the human body continue adapting before space itself begins to win? The answer waits beyond orbit. Leaving low Earth orbit means crossing an invisible boundary that has protected life on this planet for billions of years. It is the edge of Earth's magnetic shield. Inside this bubble, many of the most dangerous particles from space are deflected or weakened. Outside it, space becomes raw and unfiltered. This is where the environment changes from difficult to truly hostile. As a spacecraft moves away from Earth, the planet slowly shrinks behind it. The blue disk becomes smaller. The protective magnetic field weakens. Radiation levels rise steadily. What was once a constant background noise of particles now becomes a steady storm. High-energy cosmic rays begin passing through the spacecraft walls more frequently. These particles move at nearly the speed of light. They cannot be blocked easily. When they pass through the human body, they tear through cells at the atomic level. They leave trails of ionized atoms behind them. Each impact increases the probability of DNA damage. Unlike on Earth, there is no thick atmosphere to absorb this radiation, no magnetic field strong enough to redirect it. The human body becomes the shield. Over short periods, this exposure might not produce obvious symptoms, but over weeks and months, the effects accumulate quietly. The risk of cancer rises. The likelihood of neurological damage increases. The stability of the cardiovascular system is slowly affected. Even the brain is not immune. Some studies suggest that long-term exposure to deep space radiation could alter neural pathways and reduce cognitive performance. At the same time, the psychological environment changes dramatically. Earth is no longer directly beneath the spacecraft. It is no longer a constant visual presence. Instead, it becomes a distant object, a pale circle in the darkness. Communication delays grow. Conversations with mission control are no longer instant. Small pauses appear between question and answer. Over time, these delays will stretch into minutes. This delay changes how isolation feels. You are no longer simply far from home. You are disconnected from real-time human contact. Decisions must be made independently. Emergencies cannot rely on immediate outside guidance. Responsibility becomes heavier. The Moon represents the first destination beyond Earth's protective reach. It is close enough to reach within days, yet far enough to expose travelers to the full environment of deep space. During the Apollo missions, astronauts passed through regions of intense radiation known as the Van Allen belts. These belts trap charged particles around Earth. Passing through them requires careful timing and shielding. Even brief exposure adds to cumulative radiation dose. Once beyond these belts, the spacecraft enters open interplanetary space. Here, temperature extremes become severe. In direct sunlight, surfaces can heat to extreme levels. In shadow, temperatures can drop dramatically. Without atmospheric buffering, thermal control systems must work constantly to maintain livable conditions inside the spacecraft. Inside the human body, another silent process continues. Without gravity, and now without Earth's proximity, the sensory systems that evolved to orient humans begin to drift. The inner ear, responsible for balance, receives conflicting signals. There is no up or down. Movement becomes disorienting. Some astronauts experience space motion sickness during transitions between gravitational environments. Nausea, dizziness, and spatial confusion appear unexpectedly. Over longer journeys, the brain slowly adapts. But adaptation comes with a cost. Neural pathways adjust to weightlessness. When gravity eventually returns, this adaptation must be undone. Sleep becomes even more fragile. With no consistent sunrise or sunset, the body relies entirely on artificial schedules. Circadian rhythms weaken. Hormone cycles drift. Fatigue becomes more persistent. Concentration becomes harder to maintain for long periods. Then there is the constant awareness of danger. A small micrometeorite traveling at tens of thousands of kilometers per hour can puncture spacecraft walls. A solar flare can suddenly flood space with radiation. A system malfunction can threaten air supply, temperature control, or pressure stability. In deep space, mistakes cannot be forgiven easily. During lunar missions, Astronauts carried Earth with them in the form of supplies, oxygen tanks, water reserves, and energy systems. Everything needed for survival was pre-calculated. Every breath depended on engineering. Every drop of water was recycled. Every gram of mass was measured. This dependence creates a unique psychological pressure. There is no natural environment to rely on, no emergency shelter to run toward. The spacecraft itself becomes the only island of life in an ocean of vacuum. When astronauts step onto the moon, another extreme environment appears. Lunar gravity is only about 1/6 of Earth's. Walking feels strange. Muscles behave differently. Balance requires constant adjustment. The surface is covered with fine dust that clings to equipment and suits. There is no atmosphere to block radiation or regulate temperature. Shadows are extremely cold. Sunlit areas are dangerously hot. Even short stays on the moon reveal how hostile this environment truly is. Without heavy protective suits and constant life support systems, survival would last only seconds. And yet, the moon still lies relatively close to Earth. Emergency return is possible within days. Communication delays remain manageable. Supplies can theoretically be delivered. But beyond the moon, the situation changes again. As distance increases, communication delays grow longer. At Mars distances, messages can take many minutes to travel one way. Real-time conversation becomes impossible. Emergency support becomes delayed. Psychological isolation deepens. Radiation exposure continues accumulating. Unlike on Earth, where background radiation is relatively stable, deep space exposure fluctuates unpredictably. Solar activity can spike suddenly. Cosmic rays arrive from distant supernovae and galactic events that occurred millions of years ago. Their energy arrives without warning. Over long durations, shielding alone is not enough. Thick protection adds mass, and mass increases fuel requirements. Every additional kilogram makes the mission harder. Engineers must constantly balance protection with feasibility. Inside the human body, long-term microgravity continues to reshape physiology. Blood volume decreases, bone density continues to decline, muscle fibers shift toward weaker configurations, the immune system becomes less responsive, wound healing slows. Even the way medications behave in the bloodstream can change. The human body did not evolve for this environment. It adapts, but only within limits. Psychologically, long missions create new challenges. The absence of natural stimuli becomes noticeable. No weather, no wind, no trees, no animals, no spontaneous variation in surroundings. The environment becomes perfectly controlled and perfectly repetitive. Over months, the mind begins to crave unpredictability. Small irritations grow larger, social dynamics become more sensitive. Emotional resilience is tested continuously. Despite training, discipline, and preparation, the human brain still carries instincts shaped by Earth. It expects open spaces, natural light, and environmental feedback. In deep space, these instincts remain unmet. This combination of physical strain and psychological isolation forms the true barrier beyond Earth orbit. Not distance alone, not technology alone, but the slow erosion of the systems that keep the human body stable. Each kilometer away from Earth increases dependence on artificial life support. Each additional day increases cumulative damage. Each new adaptation pushes the body further from its natural equilibrium. And yet, humans continue forward because curiosity does not disappear with danger. The desire to explore does not fade with discomfort. The moon proved that humans can leave Earth. Deep space proves that leaving Earth comes with a price. The farther humans travel, the more space demands payment in energy, health, and time. And still, this is only the beginning. Because beyond the moon and beyond Earth's magnetic shield lies a region where rescue becomes impossible, where radiation becomes relentless, and where the human body must face the longest test of survival it has ever known. That journey begins with the path toward Mars. Mars is the first destination where distance itself becomes a serious threat to human survival. Unlike the Moon, which can be reached in days, Mars sits tens of millions of kilometers away. Even with modern propulsion, the journey takes many months. During this time, the spacecraft becomes a sealed world drifting through interplanetary space. There is no turning back easily. No quick rescue, no immediate support from Earth. From the moment the spacecraft leaves Earth's orbit and commits to the transfer path, the crew enters a phase of prolonged exposure to deep space conditions. Radiation continues to accumulate. Microgravity continues to reshape the body. Psychological isolation deepens. Every system inside the spacecraft must function perfectly for months at a time. The human body begins to experience long-duration stress unlike anything encountered in low Earth orbit. Bone density loss continues steadily. Even with daily exercise, astronauts can lose significant bone mass during extended missions. This loss weakens the skeletal structure and increases fracture risk. On a planetary surface like Mars, where gravity is weaker than Earth but stronger than the Moon, this becomes dangerous. The body must suddenly support weight again, but with weakened bones and muscles, muscle atrophy also progresses. The large muscles of the legs and back, designed for walking and standing, continue to shrink. Endurance decreases. Fine motor control can be affected. Tasks that require physical strength become more difficult over time. The cardiovascular system adapts further. Blood volume decreases. The heart becomes more efficient in microgravity but less capable of handling gravitational stress. When astronauts eventually arrive at Mars, their bodies must readjust rapidly to a new gravitational environment. This transition can cause dizziness, weakness, and reduced physical performance at a moment when strength is critically needed. Radiation exposure during the Mars journey is one of the greatest risks. Outside Earth's magnetic field, astronauts are exposed to galactic cosmic rays and solar particle events. These particles penetrate deep into tissue. Unlike short-term radiation exposure on Earth, deep space radiation delivers damage slowly and continuously. The brain is particularly vulnerable. Some studies suggest that high-energy particles can disrupt neural circuits. Memory, attention, and decision-making may be affected. Over long missions, even small cognitive changes can accumulate. In a high-risk environment where every decision matters, this becomes a serious concern. The eyes are also affected. Radiation can increase the risk of cataracts. Combined with pressure changes caused by fluid shifts, vision problems may worsen. Clear sight is essential for operating equipment, reading instruments, and navigating unfamiliar terrain. The immune system continues to weaken. In space, immune cells respond differently to threats. Infections become harder to control. Healing slows. Even small injuries can become complicated when medical facilities are limited and gravity-free conditions interfere with fluid behavior inside wounds. Psychologically, the journey to Mars introduces a new level of isolation. Communication delays grow to many minutes each way. Conversations with Earth become fragmented. Emergency guidance arrives too late to be useful in many situations. The crew must become fully autonomous. This isolation changes how the brain perceives danger and responsibility. Every choice carries weight. Every system check matters. The awareness that Earth cannot help immediately creates constant background tension. The environment inside the spacecraft becomes monotonous. The same walls, the same sounds, the same routines. Over months, sensory deprivation begins to affect mental health. Without natural landscapes, fresh air, or changing weather, the mind struggles to remain stimulated. Even with carefully designed habitats, artificial lighting, and entertainment systems, the absence of natural Earth stimuli becomes noticeable. The brain evolved to process rich sensory environments. Deep space offers the opposite: silence, darkness, and repetition. When the spacecraft finally approaches Mars, another challenge appears. The planet is not friendly to life. Its atmosphere is thin and composed mostly of carbon dioxide. Surface pressure is too low for humans to survive without pressurized suits. Temperatures are extremely cold. Dust storms can cover entire regions and last for weeks. Mars has no global magnetic field. This means radiation continues to reach the surface. While the planet provides some physical shielding compared to open space, it is far less protective than Earth. Long-term habitation would expose humans to constant radiation even while standing on the ground. Gravity on Mars is only about 1/3 of Earth's. This partial gravity reduces some of the problems of microgravity, but does not eliminate them. Bone loss may slow, but it does not stop completely. Muscles still receive less stress than on Earth. The cardiovascular system must operate under unfamiliar conditions. Living on Mars would require constant life support. Oxygen must be produced artificially. Water must be extracted or recycled. Food must be grown in controlled environments. Every system must work continuously. Any failure could become fatal within minutes or hours. The psychological challenge of living on another planet cannot be underestimated. The horizon looks unfamiliar. The sky is not blue. The sun appears smaller. Earth becomes a distant point of light in the sky. The sense of separation becomes permanent. For the human mind, this distance changes perception. Home is no longer a reachable place. Return journeys take months. Emergencies cannot be solved quickly. The idea of being truly alone in the universe becomes real. Even if humans establish temporary bases on Mars, long-term survival remains uncertain. Radiation exposure accumulates year after year. Medical conditions become harder to treat. Aging in low gravity and high radiation environments may accelerate certain health problems. Children born in such conditions would face unknown developmental challenges. Bones, muscles, and organs evolved under Earth's gravity. Growing up in partial gravity could alter physical development in unpredictable ways. Mars represents the furthest location humans can realistically reach with current and near-future technology, while still attempting surface operations. Beyond Mars, the distances become even more extreme. Travel times stretch into years. Life support systems must function without failure for incredibly long durations. Asteroid missions and deep space exploration beyond Mars introduce additional dangers. Many asteroids have irregular gravity fields. Landing and operating on them requires complex maneuvers. Their surfaces are unstable. Radiation exposure remains high. Communication delays continue to grow. As humans push farther outward, the idea of rescue disappears completely. Spacecraft must carry everything needed for survival. Every spare part, every backup system, every medical supply must be planned in advance. There is no emergency delivery truck in deep space. At this stage, survival becomes less about exploration and more about endurance. The mission is no longer just about reaching a destination. It is about keeping the human body functional long enough to arrive. Fatigue accumulates. Stress builds. Small system failures become major threats. The margin for error becomes thinner with every additional kilometre. Mars is not the final limit of how far humans can physically travel, but it represents a psychological and biological threshold. Beyond this point, the challenges no longer increase gradually. They begin to rise sharply. Distance multiplies risk. Time amplifies exposure. Isolation magnifies stress. The farther humans go, the more space demands sacrifices from the body and mind. Muscles weaken, bones thin, radiation accumulates, mental strain deepens. Mars shows that humans can survive far from Earth, but only barely and only with constant technological support. Beyond Mars lies a region where journeys last years instead of months, where radiation becomes relentless, and where the human body must face the longest and harshest test of endurance it has ever encountered. That region begins with the outer solar system. Beyond Mars, the solar system begins to stretch into vast distances that challenge not only technology, but the limits of human endurance. The inner planets still feel connected to the Sun's warmth and Earth's familiarity. The outer regions feel different, darker, colder, more distant from anything that resembles home. Travelling toward the outer planets means spending years inside a spacecraft. Not months, not seasons, but long, continuous stretches of time where the crew lives in artificial environments without interruption. Every system must operate flawlessly for durations longer than any human space mission has ever attempted. As the spacecraft moves farther from the Sun, sunlight weakens, solar panels become less effective. Energy must come from alternative sources. Heat becomes more difficult to maintain. Inside the spacecraft, temperature control becomes a constant battle against the cold of deep space. Radiation exposure does not decrease. In fact, far from Earth's magnetic protection, cosmic radiation becomes more intense and constant. Over multiple years, the cumulative dose becomes dangerous. The probability of cancer increases significantly. Damage to blood-forming tissues in bone marrow becomes more likely. Long-term neurological effects become harder to ignore. The human nervous system is particularly sensitive to prolonged radiation exposure. High-energy particles can disrupt cellular communication. They can interfere with synaptic connections in the brain. Over time, this may affect memory formation, emotional regulation, and cognitive speed. Small changes that might be manageable on Earth become serious risks when survival depends on precise decision-making. The skeletal system continues to degrade in microgravity. Even with artificial gravity concepts or exercise routines, maintaining Earth-level bone density becomes extremely difficult. After years in space, bones may become fragile. The risk of fractures increases dramatically. A broken bone in deep space is not a simple medical issue. It can become life-threatening. Muscle loss also accelerates over long durations. Strength decreases. Reaction time slows. Fine motor coordination weakens. Performing complex repairs or emergency procedures becomes more physically demanding. The cardiovascular system adapts further. Blood volume decreases. The heart's shape and efficiency change. When gravity is absent for extended periods, the body forgets how to manage blood flow under normal gravitational conditions. Returning to any planetary surface becomes more dangerous the longer the journey lasts. Psychological stress becomes one of the greatest threats. In the outer solar system, communication delays with Earth stretch to tens of minutes or more. Conversations become slow exchanges of recorded messages. Emotional connection weakens. Real-time support disappears. The sense of isolation grows deeper than anything experienced on Earth. There are no cities nearby, no rescue missions possible within reasonable time, no immediate help. The crew becomes completely dependent on each other and on machines. Over years of confinement, the human brain begins to crave novelty and stimulation. Without new environments, natural sounds, or changing landscapes, the mind struggles to remain balanced. Small interpersonal conflicts can become amplified. Emotional fatigue accumulates. Even the perception of time begins to change. Days blend together. Weeks lose clear boundaries. Without natural cues like weather or seasonal change, the brain relies entirely on artificial schedules. This can weaken motivation and distort the sense of progress. As the spacecraft approaches the outer planets, the environment outside becomes increasingly hostile. Jupiter's radiation belts are among the most dangerous in the solar system. They contain intense streams of charged particles trapped by the planet's powerful magnetic field. Passing through this region exposes astronauts to radiation levels that can be lethal without heavy shielding. Saturn, Uranus, and Neptune offer no solid surfaces suitable for landing. These gas and ice giants are surrounded by extreme atmospheric pressures and violent storms. Temperatures plunge far below anything humans experience on Earth. Even orbiting these planets exposes spacecraft to harsh radiation and gravitational forces. Operating near these worlds would require unprecedented levels of protection. Thick shielding adds mass. Additional mass requires more fuel. More fuel increases mission complexity. Every solution creates new problems. Beyond the outer planets lies the Kuiper Belt. This distant region contains icy objects and remnants from the formation of the solar system. Temperatures here approach absolute cold. Sunlight is weak and dim. Energy must be carefully managed. Communication delays become extreme. At these distances, the sun appears as just another bright star. Earth becomes invisible to the naked eye. The psychological effect of this separation is profound. Home is no longer a visible place, it becomes a memory. Long-duration exposure to deep space conditions creates cumulative stress that the human body was never designed to endure. Radiation damage does not reset. Bone loss does not fully recover. Neurological changes may persist. Each year adds permanent strain. Even with advanced medical technology, repairing this damage becomes increasingly difficult. The body's natural healing processes slow down in microgravity. Cellular regeneration becomes less efficient. Immune response weakens further. The longer humans remain in deep space, the more artificial life support systems must compensate for biological limitations. Oxygen recycling, water purification, waste management, food production, and temperature control become the foundation of survival. Any failure becomes catastrophic. At this stage, survival becomes less about exploration and more about sustaining a fragile bubble of life inside a hostile universe. The spacecraft is no longer a vehicle. It becomes a moving habitat, carrying the last piece of Earth's environment with it. The margin for error becomes extremely thin. Equipment degradation, radiation damage to electronics, and mechanical wear accumulate over time. Spare parts are limited. Repairs must be performed with decreasing physical strength and mental endurance. Human adaptability has limits. The body can adjust to short-term changes. It can survive months or even a few years with careful support. But multi-year journeys push adaptation toward breakdown. Beyond a certain point, the cost becomes too high. The body cannot recover fast enough. Damage accumulates faster than it can be repaired. Mental strain outpaces emotional resilience. This is where distance stops being measured in kilometers and begins to be measured in biological tolerance. Every additional year in deep space subtracts from the body's stability. Every new region introduces harsher conditions. The solar system itself becomes a test of how much punishment the human organism can absorb before failing. Humans can reach far beyond Mars. They can travel toward the outer planets. They can explore the cold edges of the solar system. But survival becomes increasingly fragile. And beyond the boundary of the solar system lies an even greater challenge, where distances stretch into light years, where travel times exceed human lifespans, and where the question is no longer how far humans can go, but whether they can remain human at all. That boundary is the edge of interstellar space. Interstellar space begins where the influence of the sun finally fades, the solar wind weakens. The protective bubble that surrounds the solar system dissolves into the wider ocean of the galaxy. Beyond this boundary, there is no nearby star providing warmth, light, or stability, only darkness, radiation, and unimaginable distance. For the human body, this region represents a new category of danger, not because conditions suddenly become dramatic, but because time itself becomes the enemy. Reaching even the nearest star system requires travelling distances measured in light years. With current propulsion technology, such journeys would take tens of thousands of years. Even with optimistic future advancements, travel times would still stretch far beyond a single human lifetime. This transforms the challenge from one of endurance into one of generational survival. Inside a spacecraft moving through interstellar space, the environment would remain artificial and sealed indefinitely. There would be no resupply missions, no emergency returns, no external support. The crew would carry everything needed for survival across decades or centuries. Radiation exposure becomes relentless. Without the Sun's magnetic influence and Earth's protective field, galactic cosmic rays dominate the environment. These particles originate from distant supernovae and extreme cosmic events. They strike spacecraft constantly. Over long periods, shielding becomes less effective. High-energy particles penetrate deeply into materials and tissue. For the human body, this means continuous cellular damage. DNA repair systems work constantly, but they are not perfect. Over decades, mutations accumulate. Cancer risk rises dramatically. Nervous tissue becomes vulnerable. Blood-forming cells in bone marrow are repeatedly stressed. The brain faces unique challenges. Prolonged exposure to radiation may alter cognitive function. Memory formation, emotional regulation, and reaction speed can degrade slowly. In an environment where human survival depends on careful coordination and technical expertise, even small cognitive changes become dangerous. Microgravity remains a constant threat. Without artificial gravity systems, bones and muscles continue to weaken. Over long durations, the skeletal system may reach a point where structural integrity is compromised. The body becomes fragile. Injuries become more likely. Healing becomes slower. Artificial gravity could reduce some of these effects, but creating stable rotational habitats introduces new engineering challenges. Even small mechanical failures could destabilize the system. Long-term maintenance becomes increasingly difficult as materials degrade and components wear down. Psychologically, interstellar travel pushes the human mind beyond familiar boundaries. Isolation becomes permanent. The idea of return disappears. Earth becomes a distant historical reference rather than a reachable destination. The crew must accept that they will never see their home planet again. This realization carries emotional weight that cannot be fully simulated during training. It changes motivation, identity, and long-term purpose. Over generations, this psychological shift becomes even more complex. Children born in space would grow up without experiencing Earth. Their sense of normality would be shaped entirely by artificial environments. Their bodies would develop under altered gravity conditions. Their perception of space would differ from anything humans have known before. Social structures inside the spacecraft become critical. Cooperation is no longer optional. Conflict becomes dangerous. Emotional stability becomes a survival requirement. Even small disagreements can escalate when escape from the environment is impossible. There are no separate cities, no new communities, only the same limited group of individuals sharing a closed ecosystem. Over decades, cultural identity begins to change. Language, habits, and values slowly drift away from Earth-based norms. The crew becomes a new isolated branch of humanity, shaped by distance and necessity. Biologically, long-term life in space may push the human body toward adaptation. Over generations, natural selection could favor traits better suited to low-gravity environments. Bone structure, muscle distribution, cardiovascular systems, and even sensory perception could shift. This process would not be controlled. It would emerge slowly and unpredictably. The result would be humans who are no longer fully adapted to Earth's environment. At this point, the question is no longer about how far humans can travel. It becomes a question of how much change humanity can tolerate before becoming something different. Technology may attempt to preserve Earth-like conditions inside spacecraft. Artificial gravity, radiation shielding, controlled ecosystems, and medical intervention could reduce many risks, but perfect replication of Earth is impossible. Small differences accumulate over time. Materials degrade. Electronics suffer radiation damage. Life support systems require constant maintenance. Food production systems must operate flawlessly for decades. Any long-term failure could threaten the entire mission. Even with perfect engineering, time introduces uncertainty. Mechanical systems are not immortal. Biological systems are not perfect. The longer the journey, the greater the chance of unexpected failure. The idea of cryogenic sleep or suspended animation is often imagined as a solution. By slowing metabolism, humans could reduce aging and resource consumption. But such technology remains theoretical. Even if achieved, it introduces new risks. Long-term biological preservation is extremely complex. Cellular damage could occur during freezing and reanimation. The brain may not tolerate extended suspension without consequences. Another proposed solution is robotic exploration. Machines do not require oxygen, food, or psychological support. They can operate in extreme radiation and temperature conditions. They can travel for decades without concern for biological limits. This reality highlights a harsh truth. Interstellar exploration may be better suited to machines than to humans. The universe is not designed for fragile biological organisms. It is vast, cold, and unforgiving. Human curiosity, however, continues to push outward. The desire to reach other stars is deeply rooted in imagination and exploration instinct. It represents the ultimate frontier, but every step beyond the solar system multiplies the challenges. Distance becomes extreme. Time becomes dominant. Biology becomes the weakest link. The human body evolved on a planet with gravity, atmosphere, magnetic protection, and abundant resources. Removing these foundations reveals how dependent life is on Earth's environment. Interstellar space exposes the true scale of human vulnerability. At this distance, the question of survival becomes philosophical as well as biological. Is it still humanity if it requires complete dependence on machines to remain alive? Is exploration worth the cost of irreversible physical and psychological change? The farther humans travel, the more survival becomes an act of defiance against nature itself. This is where the idea of a natural limit begins to appear. Not a wall in space, not a physical barrier, but a boundary defined by biology, time, and endurance. Beyond this boundary, humans can still send machines. They can still send signals. They can still observe. But sending living bodies becomes increasingly unrealistic. Interstellar space represents the point where the universe stops being a place humans can inhabit and becomes a place humans can only study from afar. This is the edge where space does not kill instantly, but slowly, through time, distance, and accumulation. And beyond this edge lies the final question, not how far humans can travel, but whether the universe itself allows humans to truly belong anywhere other than Earth. At the far edge of what humans could ever attempt lies a boundary that no spacecraft map can draw. It is not marked by stars or planets. It is defined by time, biology, and the slow decay of the human body itself. This is where distance stops being the main obstacle. Here, survival is limited not by engines, but by what it means to remain alive. Even if technology advanced far beyond anything available today, the human body would still carry the same fundamental weaknesses. Cells age, DNA accumulates damage, organs wear down. No amount of engineering can fully remove these biological processes. Space does not need to destroy the body violently. It only needs to let time pass. As years turn into decades, the effects of long-term space exposure compound. Radiation damage continues accumulating inside every cell. Even with heavy shielding, high-energy particles still penetrate living tissue. Over long durations, the body's repair systems become overwhelmed. Mutations increase. Cancer risk rises dramatically. Cellular aging accelerates. At the same time, prolonged artificial environments place constant stress on physiological systems. Even with artificial gravity, perfect replication of Earth's conditions is impossible. Slight differences in pressure, temperature, and atmospheric composition slowly affect lung function, circulation, and metabolism. The immune system, already weakened by long-term spaceflight, becomes less effective with age. The ability to fight infections declines, healing slows, minor injuries become more dangerous. In a closed environment with limited medical resources, this vulnerability becomes critical. The brain also ages differently in space. Radiation exposure may accelerate neurodegeneration. Cognitive decline becomes more likely. Memory, attention, and emotional regulation slowly degrade. Decision-making becomes harder. Reaction time slows. In deep space, where every decision can determine survival, even small cognitive changes carry enormous consequences. Then there is the effect of isolation over extreme durations. Even the strongest minds depend on social interaction, environmental variety, and emotional connection. Without these, mental health becomes fragile. Depression, anxiety, and emotional exhaustion become more likely. Over decades, the absence of Earth's natural rhythms takes its toll. There are no seasons, no changing skies, no rain, no wind, no forests. The mind remains trapped inside artificial surroundings that never truly change. Motivation becomes harder to maintain. Purpose becomes abstract. When Earth is no longer reachable and destinations remain far away, the sense of progress weakens. Time itself becomes the greatest threat. On Earth, aging is buffered by stable environments, medical infrastructure, and social support systems. In deep space, aging occurs in isolation, under radiation stress, and without access to full medical care. This accelerates physical decline. Even if a human could physically survive decades of space travel, the probability of remaining fully functional decreases steadily. Eventually, the body reaches a point where it cannot adapt further. This is where space begins to kill, not through sudden catastrophe, but through gradual breakdown. The heart weakens, the lungs lose elasticity, muscles lose strength, bones become fragile, the brain slows, the immune system falters, the body becomes more vulnerable with every passing year. No technology can eliminate this entirely. At best, it can slow the process. Some imagine that genetic modification could make humans more resistant to radiation, aging, and low gravity. In theory, altering DNA could increase cellular repair efficiency or strengthen resistance to damage. But this would fundamentally change what it means to be human. The result would no longer be the same species that evolved on Earth. Others imagine merging biology with machines, artificial organs, neural implants, synthetic tissues. This could extend survival, but it blurs the line between human and machine. At some point, survival becomes dependent on replacing natural biology piece by piece. This raises a deeper question: how much modification can occur before the traveller is no longer fully human? The universe is not designed for biological life. It is cold, empty, and dominated by radiation and vacuum. Life exists on Earth because of a rare combination of conditions. Gravity holds atmosphere in place. Magnetic fields deflect radiation. Liquid water stabilizes chemistry. Temperature ranges remain moderate. Remove these conditions, and life must fight constantly just to exist. The farther humans travel from Earth, the more artificial support becomes necessary. At some point, survival becomes a continuous battle against the natural state of the universe. This is the true limit. Not a wall of fire, not a sudden explosion, but a gradual point where the cost of survival becomes greater than what biology can sustain. Even if humans could reach another star system through extreme technological effort, the journey itself would push the body beyond natural tolerance. The traveller would arrive changed, weakened, aged, and biologically strained, and beyond individual survival lies another barrier: reproduction. For humanity to truly expand beyond Earth, humans would need to reproduce successfully in space or on distant worlds. But reproduction depends on stable gravity, radiation protection, and precise biological conditions. Developing embryos are highly sensitive to radiation and environmental stress. Long-term exposure could cause developmental problems. Without Earth-like conditions, healthy reproduction becomes uncertain. This means long-term colonization becomes extremely difficult. Even if adults survive, future generations may not develop normally. Bone growth, muscle formation, and organ development depend on gravity and environmental stability. Growing up in space could permanently alter physical structure. At this stage, space no longer simply threatens individuals. It threatens the continuity of the species. This is where the universe imposes its final boundary, not through violence, but through incompatibility. Life evolved for Earth. Space evolved for emptiness. The farther humans go, the more they must bend themselves to fit an environment that was never meant to support them. Eventually, the balance breaks. And this is where the original question finds its answer. How far could humans actually go before space kills them? They can reach orbit, they can reach the moon, they can travel to Mars, they can push toward the outer solar system, they can even dream of interstellar journeys. But the true limit is not measured in kilometers, it is measured in time. Years of radiation exposure, decades of isolation, lifetimes of biological strain. Space does not kill humans instantly. It slowly removes the conditions that allow humans to remain human. Beyond a certain distance, survival becomes temporary. Beyond a certain duration, biology begins to fail. Beyond a certain point, space always wins. This is not because humans are weak. It is because Earth is rare, a small planet with gravity, water, air, and protection. A fragile island of life in an ocean of darkness. Every human who leaves Earth carries that island with them inside a spacecraft. But the farther they travel, the thinner that island becomes, and eventually there is nothing left to carry. That is the true edge of human travel, not the edge of the universe, not the edge of technology, but the edge of what a living body can endure. Beyond that, space does not need to attack. It only needs to wait. There is one final layer to this journey that does not belong to physics or engineering. It belongs to perception, to meaning, to the way the human mind understands distance, purpose, and existence itself. Because even before the body reaches its breaking point, the mind begins to face something deeper than danger. As humans move farther from Earth, the sense of scale changes. On the surface of the planet, distances feel manageable. Cities are connected by roads. Continents are separated by oceans, yet reachable within hours. Space destroys this familiarity. Every step outward multiplies distance in ways the human brain was never designed to fully grasp. When Earth becomes a small dot in the darkness, something fundamental shifts. The planet is no longer a place. It becomes an idea, a memory, a symbol of everything familiar. Home is no longer behind you in a physical sense. It exists only in memory and delayed communication. This separation changes identity. For most of human history, identity has been tied to land, culture, climate, and environment. Even modern societies remain deeply connected to geography. Space removes this anchor completely. A human living far from Earth exists without a natural environment to belong to. The only surroundings are metal walls, artificial light, and controlled air. Over long durations, this creates a psychological tension that is difficult to resolve. The brain evolved to feel grounded in physical landscapes. Mountains, rivers, skies, and seasons shape perception and emotion. In space, these cues disappear. Instead, the mind exists in a constant state of artificial stability. Temperature never changes naturally. Weather does not exist. Day and night are controlled by switches. Even silence becomes unnatural, replaced by the constant hum of machines. At first, this stability feels comfortable, predictable, safe. But over time, the absence of natural variation becomes mentally exhausting. The brain craves unpredictability. It craves sensory complexity. Without it, attention becomes dull. Motivation weakens, emotional responsiveness fades. This is where space begins to affect the human spirit, not just the body. Exploration has always been driven by curiosity and reward. New lands promised resources, knowledge, and opportunity. In deep space, the reward becomes abstract. There are no forests to harvest, no oceans to cross for trade, no civilizations to encounter, only empty distance and scientific data. For some, this is enough. The pursuit of knowledge is powerful, but for long-duration crews, the absence of tangible progress can become emotionally draining. When destinations take decades to reach, the sense of achievement becomes delayed far beyond a single lifetime. This creates a unique psychological burden. You are traveling toward a future you may never personally experience. You are maintaining systems, routines, and survival not for immediate reward, but for a distant outcome that exists only in planning documents and mission goals. Purpose becomes fragile when it cannot be reinforced by direct experience. At the same time, the awareness of vulnerability never disappears. Every sound inside the spacecraft matters. Every vibration is noticed. Every system alert triggers instant attention. The mind remains partially on alert at all times. This constant low-level stress accumulates. It does not explode dramatically. It settles quietly into daily life, shaping mood and perception. Over years, it can lead to emotional fatigue. Human relationships inside the spacecraft become central to survival. Crew members are not just colleagues. They are the only social world available. Every interaction matters. Small misunderstandings can grow large when there is no escape from shared space. Trust becomes essential. Emotional intelligence becomes a survival skill. Cooperation is no longer optional. It is a requirement. Over long missions, group dynamics evolve, hierarchies soften or harden. Leadership styles adapt. Emotional bonds form more deeply than on Earth because there are no alternative social circles. This creates strong connections, but also vulnerability. Loss becomes more painful. Conflict becomes more dangerous. Emotional stability becomes as important as physical health. And then there is the awareness of time. In deep space, time is not measured by seasons or years in the traditional sense. It is measured by maintenance cycles, system checks, and distance traveled. Days become units of operation rather than lived experiences. This mechanical relationship with time can slowly detach the mind from natural rhythms. Life begins to feel like a continuous maintenance process rather than a journey of experiences. For some individuals, this creates a strange emotional flattening. The extremes of joy and sadness become muted. The mind enters a state of emotional efficiency, focusing on survival and routine rather than emotional richness. This adaptation helps with endurance, but it comes at a psychological cost. At the far edge of human travel, even the idea of arrival becomes uncertain. What does it mean to arrive somewhere that was never meant to support life? What does it mean to step onto a planet that cannot provide air, water, or protection without massive technological intervention? Arrival no longer represents safety. It represents another environment that must be fought against. This realization changes the emotional meaning of exploration. Space is not a place of rest. It is a place of continuous resistance. The universe does not welcome life. It tolerates it only in rare pockets where conditions happen to align. Earth is one of those rare pockets. When humans leave it, they carry a small artificial version of Earth with them, but the farther they go, the harder it becomes to maintain that fragile bubble. At some point, the cost becomes psychological as well as biological. This is where many theoretical missions fail, not because of fuel limitations, but because of human limitations. even if a spacecraft could technically reach another star. The question remains whether the crew could remain emotionally stable, cognitively sharp, and socially functional long enough to make the journey meaningful. The human brain evolved for cooperation in natural environments, not for isolation inside metal shells travelling through darkness. This does not mean humans cannot adapt. They can. They always have. But adaptation has limits. At extreme distances and durations, adaptation begins to resemble transformation. The human travelling deep into space is no longer the same human who left Earth. Their body has changed, their mind has changed. Their sense of time, identity, and belonging has shifted. This transformation is subtle at first, then it becomes permanent. And this is where the final boundary emerges. Not the boundary of distance, not the boundary of fuel, not the boundary of engineering, but the boundary of meaning. At some point, travelling farther no longer adds understanding. It no longer increases connection. It only increases separation. The farther humans go, the more they must ask what they are trying to preserve. Is it physical survival? Is it knowledge? Is it identity? Is it the idea of humanity itself? Because space does not only test muscles and bones, it tests memory, it tests culture, it tests the emotional foundation that makes life feel valuable. Beyond a certain point, survival becomes possible only by becoming more machine-like, more controlled, more optimized, less emotional, less spontaneous. And when that happens, the journey stops being about exploration and becomes about endurance alone. This is why the true limit of human travel is not marked by a star or a planet. It is marked by the moment when staying human becomes harder than staying alive. That moment does not happen at a specific distance. It happens gradually, with each year away from Earth, with each layer of artificial life support, with each loss of natural connection. Space does not push humans back with force. It pulls them forward into silence until the question is no longer how far they can go, but how much of themselves they are willing to leave behind to get there. There is a quiet realization that arrives at the end of this journey. It does not come with alarms or explosions. It does not announce itself loudly. It settles slowly, like dust drifting through empty space. It is the understanding that the universe is not built for living bodies. It is built for distance, silence, and time. When humans imagine travelling far into space, they often picture destinations, new planets, new stars, new horizons. But space does not offer destinations in the way Earth does. It offers environments that must be fought against at every moment. There is no natural shelter, no breathable air waiting to be discovered, no stable ground designed for human feet. Every place beyond Earth requires construction before it can be inhabited. Every breath must be manufactured. Every drop of water must be recycled. Every degree of temperature must be controlled. Survival becomes an engineering problem that never ends. This changes the meaning of movement. On Earth, travel brings change. New cultures, new climates, new experiences. In space, travel often brings sameness, the same interior walls, the same recycled air, the same routines. Distance increases, but the environment inside the spacecraft remains nearly identical. The external universe becomes more alien, while the internal world becomes more artificial. This contrast creates a strange psychological effect. The farther humans travel, the smaller their lived environment becomes. The universe grows larger, but the human world shrinks to the size of a habitat module. At extreme distances, this becomes the defining feature of existence. Life is no longer lived in open environments. It is lived inside machines. The body adapts to this reality. Muscles learn new movement patterns. Balance systems recalibrate. Sensory perception changes. The mind becomes accustomed to artificial lighting and enclosed spaces. But adaptation has a cost. The more the body adapts to space, the less compatible it becomes with Earth. Returning home becomes physically difficult. Gravity feels heavy. Natural light feels overwhelming. Sounds feel louder. Sensory input becomes intense. The traveller becomes caught between worlds, no longer fully suited to Earth, never truly suited to space. This in-between state becomes permanent for those who spend long durations away from the planet. It is a biological signature of deep space travel. Over generations, this effect would grow stronger. Humans born and raised in artificial habitats would develop differently. Their bodies would form under altered gravity. Their senses would calibrate to controlled environments. Their concept of nature would be inherited rather than experienced. Earth would become a mythic place, a historical reference, a distant origin story. This raises a fundamental question about expansion into space. Is humanity trying to spread life, or is it trying to preserve Earth's conditions in artificial form? Because what humans carry into space is not just technology, they carry a blueprint of Earth itself. Atmosphere composition, temperature ranges, biological cycles, even microbial ecosystems. Without recreating these conditions, long-term survival becomes impossible. This means that true expansion into space is not about adapting humans to the universe. It is about forcing small pieces of Earth to exist in environments that naturally resist life, and this process becomes harder the farther one travels. Resources become scarcer, energy becomes harder to collect, maintenance becomes more complex, the margin for error becomes smaller. Eventually, the effort required to maintain Earth-like conditions exceeds the benefits of travelling farther. At that point, exploration becomes symbolic rather than practical. This is where robots begin to replace humans naturally. Machines do not need breathable air. They do not suffer from radiation-induced cancer. They do not experience isolation or emotional fatigue. They can operate in vacuum, extreme cold, and intense radiation. For many scientific missions, machines already outperform humans in deep space. They can travel longer. They can survive harsher conditions. They do not require return journeys. This creates a dividing line between biological exploration and mechanical exploration. Humans remain best suited for environments that support life naturally. Machines dominate environments that do not. This does not diminish human achievement. It reveals something deeper about the nature of life. Life is rare because it depends on balance. Temperature, chemistry, gravity, and protection must align perfectly. Earth provides this alignment. Space does not. The farther humans move from Earth, the more they move away from the conditions that created them. This is why space does not need to actively destroy humans. It only needs to remain unchanged. Its natural state is already incompatible with biological life. Vacuum removes air. Radiation damages cells. Cold drains heat. Distance isolates support. Time amplifies all of these effects. Together, they form a quiet barrier. Not a wall, not a force field, but a gradual slope where survival becomes harder with every step forward. At some point, that slope becomes too steep to climb. Humans can still send messages. They can still send probes. They can still observe distant galaxies and stars. But sending living bodies becomes increasingly impractical. This does not mean exploration stops. It changes form. Instead of physical presence, knowledge becomes the traveller. Data becomes the explorer. Signals replace footsteps. Telescopes reach farther than spacecraft. Radio waves cross distances no human body ever could. Information becomes the fastest form of movement in the universe. In this way, humanity still expands, not by occupying space physically, but by understanding it. This shift reflects the true nature of cosmic exploration. The universe is not meant to be conquered by bodies. It is meant to be observed, measured, and understood. When humans look outward, they are not finding new homes. They are finding perspective. They see how small Earth is, how fragile life is, how rare stability is. This awareness changes priorities. Protecting Earth becomes more important than escaping it. Preserving life becomes more urgent than spreading it. Sustainability becomes more valuable than distance. Because after seeing how hostile space truly is, one truth becomes clear. There is no backup planet waiting with open arms. There is no second Earth hidden nearby. There is only one place where the human body belongs naturally, and that place is here. This does not mean humans should stop exploring. It means exploration should be guided by understanding rather than fantasy. The dream of reaching distant stars is powerful. It inspires innovation and curiosity, but the reality of biological limits reminds us where our foundation truly lies. The farther humans go, the more they realize that the greatest journey is not outward, but inward. Understanding life, protecting ecosystems, preserving the conditions that allow consciousness to exist at all. Space teaches this lesson quietly by showing how empty it is, how cold it is, how unforgiving it is. It reveals the miracle of Earth by contrast, and this is the final realization at the edge of human travel. Space does not represent humanity's future home, it represents humanity's greatest classroom. A place that teaches humility, a place that teaches scale, a place that teaches gratitude for the small, fragile planet that made everything possible. Humans can go far. They can go farther than any species before them. They can leave their planet and touch the edge of the unknown. But no matter how far they travel, the place that keeps them alive, the place that shapes who they are, the place that allows them to exist at all, will always remain behind them, waiting. Spinning quietly beneath the stars. When the journey finally reaches its furthest point, there is no dramatic boundary waiting in space. There is no sign that says this is where humans must stop. Instead, there is a quiet realization that emerges from everything learned along the way. It is the understanding that distance alone does not define how far humans can go. What truly defines the limit is the balance between survival and meaning. At first, exploration feels heroic. Leaving Earth feels like progress. Each mission expands knowledge. Each new region visited feels like a victory over the unknown. But as humans move farther outward, the cost becomes clearer. Every kilometre away from Earth increases dependence on machines. Every additional year adds strain to the body and mind. Every new environment removes another layer of natural support. Eventually, exploration becomes less about discovery and more about maintenance. Maintaining oxygen systems, maintaining radiation shielding, maintaining mental stability, maintaining fragile ecosystems inside artificial habitats. This shift changes the emotional tone of space travel. The excitement of exploration slowly transforms into the discipline of survival. Curiosity is still present, but it is accompanied by constant awareness of risk. At extreme distances, the idea of adventure fades. What remains is endurance. This is where the concept of how far becomes misleading. Humans could theoretically travel farther with enough time, energy, and engineering, but the farther they go, the less human the experience becomes. There are no landscapes to explore, no natural life to interact with, no atmosphere to breathe freely. Instead, there are instruments, screens, data streams, and maintenance schedules. Life becomes abstract. The human body continues adapting, but adaptation has consequences. Muscles weaken. Bones change structure. Sensory perception shifts. The brain adjusts to artificial environments. Emotional responses become more controlled, more restrained, more focused on efficiency. This creates a version of humanity shaped by space rather than by Earth. And this raises an important question. Is the goal to carry humans into space, or to preserve what makes humans human? Because if the price of reaching distant regions is losing emotional richness, biological stability, and natural connection, then distance alone may not be worth the cost. The universe does not reward physical presence. It does not care whether humans stand on distant planets or not. It remains unchanged regardless of who observes it. What changes is the observer. When humans leave Earth, they carry their biology, psychology, and culture with them. Over time, all three begin to transform, not because of intention, but because the environment demands it. This transformation is slow and subtle, but over long durations it becomes irreversible. The person who returns from long-term space travel is not the same as the person who left. Their body responds differently to gravity. Their mind processes time differently. Their sense of belonging has shifted. Now imagine this transformation stretched across decades or generations. At that point, humanity does not simply expand into space. It fragments into different forms adapted to different conditions. Some remain on Earth, shaped by gravity and natural ecosystems. Others exist in artificial habitats, shaped by controlled environments and isolation. Some may eventually adapt biologically to low-gravity life. This future is not necessarily negative. It represents diversity. But it also represents separation. The farther humans go, the more divided their experience of reality becomes. Communication delays grow, cultural differences widen, shared reference points fade. At extreme distances, even language and values may evolve differently. This means that travelling far into space does not only challenge individual survival, it challenges collective identity. Humanity becomes less unified as distance increases. This introduces another kind of limit, a social and cultural limit. How far can humans go while still remaining connected as one species? When messages take years to travel, shared decision-making becomes impossible. Coordination becomes symbolic. Unity becomes philosophical rather than practical. At that point, exploration becomes isolated rather than collective. This does not make it meaningless, but it changes its purpose. The original dream of space exploration was not only about reaching distant places, it was about expanding human understanding, about uniting people around shared achievement, about inspiring future generations. But at extreme distances, exploration becomes invisible to most of humanity. It happens too far away to be experienced or emotionally shared. The achievement becomes abstract. This creates a quiet paradox. The farther humans go, the fewer people are able to truly experience the journey. At the same time, the knowledge gained from space exploration does not require physical presence. Telescopes reveal distant galaxies, satellites map planets, probes explore hostile environments without risking human lives. This means that much of what humans seek in space can be achieved without sending bodies. Understanding does not require occupation. Perspective does not require settlement. Discovery does not require permanent presence. This realization does not diminish the bravery of astronauts or explorers. It reframes the purpose of exploration itself. The universe becomes less of a destination and more of a source of knowledge. In this context, the ultimate limit of human travel is not the edge of the observable universe. It is the point where physical presence stops adding meaningful value compared to observation and understanding. When sending humans farther no longer increases knowledge significantly, the motivation to continue diminishes. This does not mean curiosity disappears. It evolves. Instead of asking how far can we go, the question becomes, what can we learn? This shift represents maturity in exploration. Early exploration focused on movement and conquest. Advanced exploration focuses on understanding and preservation. Space encourages this shift by revealing how fragile life truly is. Seeing Earth from orbit changes perspective. Seeing the emptiness beyond the solar system deepens it further. The more humans observe the universe, the more they understand that survival is rare and precious. This realization changes priorities. Protecting ecosystems becomes more urgent. Preserving biodiversity becomes more meaningful. Maintaining planetary stability becomes more valuable than chasing distant stars. In this way, space exploration circles back to Earth. It teaches humans that the most extraordinary environment they will ever encounter is the one they already inhabit, not because Earth is perfect, but because it is alive. No other place offers this combination of water, atmosphere, gravity, magnetic protection, and biological complexity. Every kilometre travelled away from Earth increases appreciation for this balance. This is the final emotional outcome of deep space exploration. Not escape, not conquest, but awareness. Awareness of scale, awareness of fragility, awareness of responsibility. The journey outward becomes a mirror reflecting humanity back to itself. It shows how small humans are in the cosmic scale. It shows how dependent they are on their environment. It shows how interconnected life truly is. And this is where the story reaches its quiet conclusion. How far could humans actually go before space kills them? They can go far enough to see Earth shrink into a dot. They can go far enough to feel isolation beyond anything known before. They can go far enough to test biology, psychology, and technology to their limits. But they cannot go far enough to escape the need for a living planet. Because no matter how advanced technology becomes, no matter how powerful engines grow, no matter how far signals can travel, human life remains tied to rare conditions that exist only in a few places in the universe. Space allows humans to travel, but Earth allows humans to live, and that difference defines the true boundary. Not in distance, not in time, but in belonging. The farther humans go, the clearer this truth becomes. Home is not a location that can be replaced. It is a condition that must be protected, and in the vast silence of space, that realization becomes impossible to ignore. At the end of this journey, there is nothing left to chase, no farther destination that promises safety, no hidden refuge waiting beyond the stars, only a quiet understanding that emerges after following the limits of the human body, the endurance of the mind, and the silence of space itself. Humans have always believed that distance is something to conquer. Mountains were climbed, oceans were crossed, continents were connected. Each time, the horizon moved farther away. Each time, the world felt smaller. Space breaks this pattern. No matter how far humans travel, the universe does not become smaller. It becomes larger. Every discovery reveals more emptiness, more distance, more unknown. The horizon does not come closer. It recedes endlessly. This changes the meaning of exploration. On Earth, travel leads to arrival. In space, travel often leads to deeper isolation. The farther humans go, the less connected they become to the conditions that allow life to exist naturally. This is the final realization. Space is not an extension of Earth. It is a fundamentally different environment, one that does not support biology without constant resistance. The human body can adapt only so much. It can tolerate radiation for a time. It can function in low gravity for a time. It can endure isolation for a time, but time always wins. Cells accumulate damage. Organs slowly weaken. The mind carries invisible strain. No technology can fully erase these processes. It can only delay them. This means that the ultimate limit of human travel is not defined by engines or fuel. It is defined by biology. Not by how fast humans can move, but by how long they can remain alive and functional in an environment that was never meant for them. Even if humans one day build ships capable of crossing star systems, the cost will remain the same. Survival will depend on artificial environments, constant maintenance, and continuous sacrifice of natural living conditions. This is not failure, it is reality. The universe is not hostile because it attacks life. It is hostile because it is indifferent. It does not adapt to living organisms. Living organisms must adapt to it. And adaptation has limits. This realization transforms the original question. How far could humans actually go before space kills them? The answer is not a number. It is not a location. It is not a star or a planet. The answer is a process. Humans can go far enough to leave Earth's protection, far enough to feel isolation unlike anything on the planet, far enough to test the boundaries of the body and mind. But eventually, the cost becomes greater than the benefit. Eventually, survival becomes temporary rather than sustainable. Eventually, the journey stops being about exploration and becomes about endurance alone. And that is where the limit truly exists. Not as a wall in space, but as a gradual fading of compatibility between life and the universe. This does not make space meaningless. It gives it a deeper meaning. By showing how difficult survival is beyond Earth, space reveals how extraordinary Earth truly is. A planet with breathable air, liquid water, protective magnetic fields, stable gravity, complex ecosystems. These are not common features of the universe. They are rare conditions that allow life to exist at all. Every astronaut who looks back at Earth from orbit understands this instantly. The planet does not look powerful. It looks fragile. Thin layers of atmosphere protect everything that has ever lived. A narrow band of blue holds the entire story of humanity. Space does not offer another version of this easily. It offers knowledge, it offers perspective, it offers humility. The greatest gift of space exploration is not new territory. It is understanding. Understanding how small humans are. Understanding how rare life is. Understanding how dependent civilization is on a delicate balance. When humans imagine escaping Earth, space quietly teaches the opposite lesson. There is nowhere else that offers the same conditions. There is no easy replacement for this planet. There is no backup world waiting nearby. This is not a limitation of ambition. It is a reminder of responsibility. Exploration should not be driven by the desire to leave Earth behind. It should be driven by the desire to understand it better, because the more humans learn about the universe, the more valuable their home becomes. In this way, the farthest journey humans will ever make is not outward. It is inward, toward protecting ecosystems, toward preserving biodiversity, toward maintaining climate stability, toward ensuring that future generations inherit a planet that can still support life. Space shows what happens when life is removed from natural balance. Earth shows what happens when balance exists. This contrast is the final lesson of deep space. Humans do not need to conquer the universe to find meaning. They need to understand their place within it. They are not separate from nature. They are a product of it. They exist because of rare conditions that must be protected. So when the question is asked one last time, how far could humans actually go before space kills them? The answer becomes clear. Humans can go far enough to realize that survival is not about distance. It is about belonging. Belonging to a planet that supports life, belonging to ecosystems that provide stability, belonging to a fragile world that made consciousness possible. Space allows humans to travel, but Earth allows humans to exist. And that is the final boundary. Not marked by stars, not marked by galaxies, but marked by the simple truth that life needs a home. In the vast silence of the universe, this truth becomes impossible to ignore. And when the journey ends, it does not end in darkness. It ends with perspective, with gratitude, with the understanding that the most extraordinary place humans will ever explore is the one they already call home.